Bonjour. Greetings. I want to start off today responding to the Auditor General's report. The report indicates that the Liberal government has failed Indigenous people. And this failure is not because of the pandemic. The Auditor General is very clear that the Liberal government was on track to fail in providing clean drinking water despite the pandemic. Even before the pandemic, it was clear they were going to fail. In fact, what it looks like is that the situation when it comes to clean drinking, or the work on getting clean drinking to Indigenous communities, has not improved in 6 years. Indigenous communities are no better off now after 6 years of the Liberals being in government. And that really is a betrayal. People expected a lot better. Indigenous people were hopeful that things would change. The fact that 6 years of Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister have not improved things is really heartbreaking to people who deserve the basic human right of having access to water. As we all know, water is life. I've met with so many people that can't turn on their tap and drink water. The water that they have access to is poisonous or could harm their health. And I think about what that means, what that would mean in a city like Ottawa or any other major city across Canada. If you could not turn on your tap and drink the water, what would governments do? The Liberal government is in power. It's the year 2021. We have one of the world's largest economies and technology. There is no excuse that anyone in our country doesn't have access to clean drinking water, particularly the first people of this land. So we are going to continue to fight and the hopeful fight for clean drinking water for Indigenous people. The hopeful message of the Auditor General's report is that with sustainable and stable funding, Indigenous communities could get clean drinking water. There is a path to achieving it, and we will continue to fight for that. Donc, le rapport de la vérificatrice générale du Canada montre que les libéraux ont complètement échoué leur responsabilité de livrer l'eau potable aux communautés autochtones. C'était effectivement une trahison de la confiance des communautés autochtones. Ils ont pensé peut-être les choses vont changer avec le Premier ministre Justin Trudeau. Mais effectivement, après 6 ans de gouvernement libéral, aucune chose a changé. La même condition continue. Et c'est inexcusable dans l'époque maintenant, 2021, avec les ressources qu'on a comme pays. On est une des plus grandes économies du monde, et le fait qu'on ne peut pas livrer l'eau potable aux communautés autochtones, c'est complètement inexcusable. La vérificatrice générale a aussi mentionné le fait que ce n'est pas causé par la pandémie que les délais seraient là malgré la pandémie, parce que le gouvernement a déjà manqué le coup. Donc, c'était déjà un délai et ils n'ont pas priorisé l'importance de livrer l'eau potable. Finalement, une chose positive, c'est le fait que la vérificatrice générale mentionne qu'on peut régler ce problème si on livre le financement durable et stable. On peut s'assurer que tout le monde a accès à l'eau potable. Donc, je pense de la situation, si on avait la même position, la même situation ici dans une grande ville comme Ottawa ou dans les autres villes comme Montréal, qu'est-ce que le gouvernement aurait fait si c'était la même situation, qu'on ne peut pas boire l'eau chez nous, dans la maison, dans les bâtiments, au travail, dans les écoles? Qu'est-ce que va être la réponse du gouvernement dans cette même situation si c'était dans une grande ville? Je sais que dans ce temps, on peut le faire, on doit le faire, et vous pouvez compter sur nous de continuer de pousser pour la justice, pour la communauté autochtone. Merci beaucoup, et je suis prêt pour vos questions. Thanks so much. I'm ready for any questions you might have.
Thank you. We will now proceed to questions. Nous demandons aux journalistes de poser une question et une question de suivi. We ask journalists to ask one question and one follow-up. We'll start on the phone today with one question, then go to the room où nous allons commencer au téléphone avec une question. Après à la salle, opérateur.
Merci. Thank you. The first question is from Annie Bergeron-Oliver, City National.
Questions today. I'm hoping that you can talk about the agency's report again. I know you just mentioned that.
Hey, Annie, sorry, I lost your beginning. If you could just start over.
Sure, I'll start over.
Thanks.
As you mentioned, the Liberal government is clearly not going to meet its March 21 timeline for eliminating all boil water advisories. And as this report points out, the government doesn't have a new timeline for when that will happen. This report also points out that really what has been done in recent years is a lot of temporary measures, but not a lot of long-term solution. I wonder what you think this report says about the Liberal government's commitment to First Nations communities and to really ending boil water advisories.
It shows they were all talk and they were not committed to getting it done. And that's sad. It gives me no pleasure to say this, but the reality is that they were just talking a big talk, but they were not committed to getting it done. The other thing is that the Auditor General makes it clear it could have been done. There's a clear plan. The Auditor General lays out that plan. And I can't imagine or understand for the life of me why this government has failed the Indigenous communities in such a brutal way. Like why they have failed when they promised so much, why they didn't just underdeliver, they betrayed that trust. And that's what this shows. It is a betrayal of trust and clearly an example of how they did not ever intend to get this done. That is what it shows.
And as a follow-up, Minister Miller, even in question period today, said that the government is still committed to doing this, that they're intending to work hard to end boil water advisories as fast as they can. I'm wondering what concrete steps you want to see the government take immediately to show that they genuinely are interested and committed to ending boil water advisories within the next, say, year or several years. What concrete steps do you think they can make to show First Nation communities that they really are committed to ending this problem?
Well, really exactly what the Auditor General is asking for. Stable, long-term, committed funding to solve this problem. And what the Auditor General also points out is making sure that there is the capacity to maintain water treatment sites in Indigenous communities. First Nations communities should have the training and the personnel in their own communities to maintain and upkeep those systems. There needs to be a long-term solution. It can't just be that the Liberal government, and this is really troubling, that they were doing Band-Aid fixes just to make the announcement that, this community's been helped out, but it wasn't really helped out. It looks like they were just doing things for show, that they were short-term Band-Aid solutions instead of actually fixing them. So we want to see a commitment to acknowledge that they failed. They've got to admit that they failed and they missed their target and give us a clear deadline of when they're going to plan to fix this problem. Clear funding commitments that are stable and long-term. And a clear plan, like what is their plan? Are they going to follow the recommendations? Make sure there's a path to establishing permanent long-term solutions that involve treatment centers and capital, but also the training and the personnel. We want to see that plan. And then and only then will we have some sense that this government's actually going beyond just saying the words and actually doing the work. OK. Annie, ils ont voulu la même, c'est votre suivi, mais ils ont voulu la même question en français. Ils veulent. On veut. Either way. Donc, ce qu'on veut voir, c'est pour des actions concrètes, c'est de suivre le conseil de la vérificatrice générale. Elle a donné quelques éléments spécifiques. On doit avoir un plan concret avec le financement concret, le financement qui est stable, le financement qui continue chaque année et qui est durable. Et aussi, pas seulement pour avoir la capacité dans le sens d'une capacité de livrer l'eau potable, mais aussi les ressources humaines pour faire le travail et la formation des personnels pour faire le travail. Tout ça doit être là avec un plan clair, spécifique, avec les deadlines, avec les dates aussi. C'est ce qu'on veut voir parce que la communauté autochtone mérite au moins cette justice et c'est essentiel qu'on le fait.
Thank you. We will now take a question in the room before going back to the phone. Nous allons maintenant prendre une question dans la salle avant de retourner au téléphone.
Hey, Mr. Singh.
Hey there.
I just quickly read the report, and one of the things it's not only mentioning is that, you know, they're using these temporary measures, these Band-Aid solutions to fix a problem that's been happening for decades, and they've been using policy and different frameworks that were developed like 30 years ago,
Right.
and still implementing them and trying to solve the problem. So how would you restructure Indigenous services? Or how would you, turn that department upside down to give people this basic right, clean water?
Yeah, I mean, what's troubling to me is that it's very clear that the Liberal government didn't actually intend to do this. That, to me, is the fundamental problem here. I think that beyond the plan, there's also a clear acknowledgement by the Auditor General, based on the evidence, that this government just did not intend to do this. And we know that that's the case because if this government, we've seen this Liberal government move quickly. When they wanted to buy a pipeline, they got it done right away. They can get things done quickly. So they clearly did not have this as a priority. They did not put the money necessary to get it done. They clearly chose to do Band-Aid solutions, which are not going to fix the problem. And the only reason I can imagine that they would do a Band-Aid fix is because they wanted it to look good. But because it's not actually helping the community. It doesn't help them to be taken off of an advisory 1 year to be back on it the next. That doesn't actually help people to do that. So why were they committed to this temporary fix? To me, it's because I can only imagine because they didn't want to actually fix it. So I think first off, they've got to want to fix it. I want to fix this. I'm committed to fixing it. Following the advice of the Auditor General, she lays out a clear path. It's stable, consistent funding, and a plan that involves not just the capital infrastructure, so the actual cleaning of the water treatment site, but also the personnel need to be trained, and it has to be a local solution. So Indigenous communities have to have the training and the personnel and the support so they can actually man those, or they can run those centers, the water treatment centers themselves. There's a whole host of clear guidelines and path forward that the Auditor General provides. I think those should be the starting point.
As a follow-up?
Yes, totally. And thank you for kind of outlining that essentially you're saying that we need to follow what the Auditor General is saying. But I'm just wondering, this is such a basic human right. And, most municipalities have water authorities that are separate and apart from, the municipal operations. So I'm just wondering, do we need a separate water authority or something like that? Do we need something that's systemically just bigger than or different from what we're already doing? Because it's obviously not working.
I really think it's because the government doesn't want to do it. I don't think it's a lack of capacity or ability. I think we've got the know-how, we have the technology, we have the knowledge, we've got the resources. I just don't accept that it's a systems failure. I believe it is a lack of will. It is a lack of will. This governments can do amazing things, and governments have done amazing things. We are able to do significant things to improve people's lives. In this case, the Liberal government chose not to. And the only thing I can see here is a lack of willingness to do it. There is a clear path. The Auditor General works for Canada. We have the expertise. I just don't get why a government that's in power, that promised to do something, would just fail to do it so miserably, other than they did not make it a priority. And that has to change, because these are people, these are families, these are kids. I remember this kid that had to go from their community, walk to a water center, and the water center was basically just a room filled with big jugs of water. That was how they got water in this community. And they were surrounded by lakes that were beautiful to look at, but had no way to treat the water so they could drink it. And I thought, why is this happening? There is no excuse for this.
We will now take another question on the phone. Nous allons maintenant prendre une autre question au téléphone. Operator?
Merci. Thank you. The next question, Laurence Martin, Radio-Canada. À vous.
Oui, bonjour, M. Singh.
Bonjour.
Ben, j'aimerais bien vous entendre justement un petit peu en français. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez justement des conclusions générales du rapport de la vérificatrice générale sur la question là, de l'eau potable dans les communautés autochtones. Quel message est-ce que vous pensez que ça envoie?
Le message, c'est que le gouvernement libéral ne priorise pas les inquiétudes des communautés autochtones. Il ne s'occupe pas du fait qu'ils n'ont pas accès à l'eau potable. Il ne s'occupe pas. Et le message, c'est le gouvernement libéral et Justin Trudeau, ils ont donné des belles paroles, mais ils n'ont pas livré les marchandises. Et le résultat, c'est des milliers de communautés autochtones qui ne peuvent pas avoir accès à l'eau potable. Quelque chose qu'on prend pour acquis dans notre vie. C'est normal dans notre vie. On peut boire l'eau n'importe quand, n'importe où dans les grandes villes. Mais dans une communauté autochtone, les enfants, les familles, ils n'ont pas ce même droit, ce droit essentiel et fondamental. Ils n'ont pas ce même droit. Et ça brise mon cœur. Pourquoi on est dans un pays assez riche, avec toutes les ressources, avec toute la technologie, pourquoi on ne peut pas régler ce problème? Et ce qu'on a vu avec le rapport, c'était pas un manque de capacité, pas un manque de ressources, c'était un manque de volonté. C'était un manque de volonté du part du gouvernement libéral et Justin Trudeau. Et c'est inexcusable.
Ensuite,
c'est bon, moi, je dois filer. Merci beaucoup.
Oui, merci.
We will take a question in the room. Une question à la salle.
Hello, Mr. Singh. Chris Reynolds, Canadian Press.
Hey there.
Shipbuilding.
Shipbuilding.
So today the Auditor General also found in her report that government mismanagement has threatened to leave the Navy and the Coast Guard without the ships they need to defend the country. So one thing I'm wondering is, first of all, also in the wake of a report from the PBO, from the Parliamentary Budget Officer, that the projected cost of this national shipbuilding program is going to be now $77 billion, which is $17 billion more than previously estimated. So with those two factors combined, the growing cost of this program and the delays that we've seen in delivery of these ships, should the government put a hold on this shipbuilding program? Should it suspend it or scrap it altogether? What should we do?
I believe we need to invest in Canadian jobs, and it is essential that we have a national shipbuilding strategy. If we're going to purchase ships that provide services that are essential for our country, they should be built in Canada. We should use our money to invest in the infrastructure to be able to build more ships in the future and invest in that here in Canada. So that's, I think, fundamental. And so, no, we should not abandon a shipbuilding strategy to create the capacity to build ships in our country. What the report shows, though, is that there's been clear and massive government mismanagement, and specifically the Liberal government has really mismanaged this file. That is a problem. That is what we need to fix. But the ability to build ships in our country, we've got massive coastlines and a significant need to be able to patrol those coastlines for various reasons, to protect the environment, to protect people. And so we need to have that capacity in Canada.
We also heard very recently about unspecified allegations about the new defense chief, Art McDonald. I'm wondering what this, in the wake of also accusations against Jonathan Vance, says about the military leadership in Canada, or how it reflects on the military overall, these unspecified allegations that have resulted in the defense chief stepping aside.
There is clearly something wrong with the Liberal government's vetting process. There seems to be a pattern of behavior with the government's appointed positions, whether we're talking about the Governor General or the defense chief, or in the case of Mr. Vance, there's been numerous examples of something that's clearly at fault with the Liberal government's vetting process. I want to take a moment, though, to acknowledge that though there are these very troubling cases, and I'm really worried about what that means for potential victims and people impacted, I want to also take a moment to acknowledge that there are incredible people that work in the military that do incredible work to keep us safe, that have been there in times of need, most recently notable in the crisis in our long-term care homes. The military stepped up. So there are great folks that providing great work for us, but these are very troubling. These are very, very troubling allegations and troubling vetting process.
Is the military reformable? Can they reform themselves?
Everything is reformable, for sure. We should absolutely be able to figure this out. And I think this is a vetting problem. We've seen a vetting consistent problem with the Liberal government.
We'll take one last question on the phone. Une dernière question au téléphone.
I like how you slipped that in. That was good.
Thank you. We have no further question registered at this time. Nous n'avons pas de questions pour le moment.
Ceci est la fin. This is the end. Thank you.
Merci.